there's no way that I'm going to lose this house because some appraiser who has no vested interest in this is going to take it away. I'm going to take my chainsaw, I'll cut out the back deck, I'll stack the lumber, and we'll call again.
Welcome into the Dynamis Studios this week, guys. We have a special friend of mine, a gentleman who's been on the podcast before and somebody who will more than likely be making appearances again in the future. My friend, Tyrel Rose. And today, in this week, what we're going to cover is opportunity of buying real estate at pre-foreclosure, foreclosure, or at auction. Tyrel comes with a laundry list of experience that he's about to get into. We're going to tell you all about how he started this journey, what he's doing right now, and really the tidal wave of opportunity that lays ahead. So stay tuned because this is going to be a really actionable episode. He's going to lay out steps, things that you need to be aware of, and we're going to jump right into that content really quickly. If you're looking for a previous episode with Tyrel, he is one of the first interview I ever recorded on this podcast in an episode called The Superpower of Marriage. We were working out some audio issues. It's really rudimentary, but that is his first appearance. Tyrel and I have grown up in our adult lives together. We met when we were young kids in the United States Army. We got selected and went to Ranger Regiment together. We ended up getting attached to the same company. We went to Ranger School together. We deployed multiple times together. We have bought in real estate together. We've looked and tried to buy businesses together. We've gone on startup adventures together. We just have life very intimately tied together. Tyrel is my best friend, and it's really unique to have a friend on this journey. He officiated my wedding. He takes care of my children in the event that some catastrophe were to happen. So I'm just really excited to have him here. I love Tyrel. He's got a lot of experience, and I'm stoked to have him in the studio today. So Tyrel, welcome, man.
Thanks, buddy. I am super excited to be here, and as always, we're going to have fun.
Let's jump right into it and have fun. I want to first talk about why are you qualified to sit here and talk about foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, and auction properties?
I've spent the last few years, that's all I've been doing is buying houses at foreclosure, buying them pre-foreclosure, on the auction courthouse steps, and helping develop technology to help other people find and secure those properties.
That's really unique. You just spent, over the last year, you were really heavily involved in the development of a software tool that you're going to talk about here shortly that really helps people take aggressive action, decode the mystery of buying at auction and making it a way more approachable and doable process, especially if you're just getting started into real estate. So I've told everybody in the audience already that you and I have had a real estate journey together. We still continue to look for deals, and we're always trying to get our fingers into something together. But I would love it if you just set the stage of how did you start getting into auctions in the first place?
Yeah, so I started getting into auctions in the first place kind of by accident. My wife and I were moving, and we couldn't find a home on the market that was affordable for us to buy in the neighborhoods that we wanted to live in. And we were very specific about where we wanted to live. And so I decided I've been interested in real estate auctions. I had some friends who had won houses at auctions. I talked to other people, and I had been to other auctions that were cars and household items, things like that. There was other auctions that I had won. And so I was a little bit familiar with the process, but really unfamiliar or new with real estate auctions. So I went online and I looked at what was in foreclosure, and then I saw what houses were for auction and decided to bid on one just for my own personal house.
So what did that process look like? How did you find it? For everybody listening out there, if you've never bought a property at auction, it could be very overwhelming. So let's start from the top. You wanted to find a property at auction. Did somebody tell you to look online? Like, how did this even cross your mind?
I wasn't unfamiliar with flipping houses. I had fixed up and sold several houses already, but I had never done an auction. But I knew about it enough and had seen other people. I've been there when other people purchased online auction. And so I just went and looked at auction.com. I Googled different auction houses, and the one that I landed on was Hubzu. It's HUBZU. Kind of random website, but they sell houses that are REO, like bank foreclosures that the bank owns. And there's some special things that go along with that made it so I could own a house that I would be able to live in.
Let's talk about how you got this property. So you're looking online, you saw this particular property pop up, it piqued your interest, and you decided, hey, let's go. I want to do this. So you entered your information into the website, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a registration fee, right?
For this particular auction, there was $15,000 registration fee. If you don't win, the money gets refunded, but you have to have that cash to enter this particular auction. So we found a house, and it was in the exact neighborhood that we wanted to live in. I knew enough about the neighborhood to know the values of the homes, and I knew enough about construction to know what my rehab costs would be. And that's about all that I knew. I didn't know anything about this home except for, okay, this house is going for auction, and I told my wife, hey, this could be a really good deal. Let's go for it. She said, okay, let's do it.
So when you looked at the auction list at the time, how many properties do you remember roughly were on the auction list?
At the time, this would have been 2018, going to 2019. And the houses in the area that we wanted to be in, they were coming up maybe one house a month for these particular auctions.
Okay, so how long of a window did you have to bid from the time that the auction opened with this online? And keep in mind, we're not talking about courthouse steps. We're talking an online.
Yeah, this online auction, I think, was open for 2 days, but really people only bid in the last 2 hours. We found the house, so identified this is the house, and I did my underwriting to the point where I said, okay, I know roughly this is what it's going to take to get the house up to par and livable. This is what I'm willing to pay for it. So I had the exact amount in my head. That's important going to auction. I knew enough to say, like, I'm not going to go over this number. That's it. It was literally outside chopping wood, and I came inside. Hey, it's time to bid. My wife and I are sitting there at the kitchen table with my laptop open, and there's probably 5 people bidding at first, and it starts at $100,000. It goes up. We're in the 250 range. There's only 2 people left, and the increments are going 1,000 at a time now. Me, this other guy, me, this other guy. And the way that the auction works, if you try to slip a bid in at the last possible second, an online auction isn't like an in-person auction where in an in-person auction you bid. The clock keeps going because there's an auctioneer there, there's a trustee there auctioning it off. If it's an online auction, you can't slip a bid in at the last minute and then it's yours. If you slip in a bid in the last minute, it resets the clock. So they add, I think, 5 minutes, something like that, to every time that you place a bid within that last bid timer. So you place a bid and the clock goes 5 minutes. So then I would place a bid with 30 seconds left. This other guy would wait for 30 seconds left, place a bid. So we keep on tacking on over and over again. We're down to the wire, and it's nerve-wracking. We get to my number, and I think it was around $285 for this house. I was like, man, I can't go more. We place our bid. The counter goes down. There's like 2 seconds left. The guy places another bid. I don't see this person, obviously. It's just his initials. We get beat out. Like, okay, well, that's it. We didn't get the house. We're selling our home. It closes in a week. We don't have a place to move. But we're like, okay, it's just going to work out. Doesn't matter. Like, God's got us. We're good, but a little stressful. So I go out, leave the table, close my laptop, go and finish chopping wood. It was a couple hours. We're moving a few hours away from our home now, and I had to go down there anyway. And while I was down there, I was dropping off some stuff at my parents' house, and my agent happened to be my sister-in-law. Her name was on the website. I entered her name so that she would get the fee and it wouldn't go back to the bank. She'd get 3%. She calls me and said, hey, you know that house you're telling me about? You got it. I was like, what? No, I didn't. I lost. She's like, no, they just called me. You were the backup bid and the other person pulled out. So if you're willing to pay what theirs was, which was $1,000 more than my top number, then it's yours. But you have to decide today. So what? I have to decide today. Okay. I happen to be in town, close to that house. My uncle and I jumped in my truck. My uncle was a contractor, and he taught me most what I know about fixing houses. So I was like, okay, let's go check out this house. So we rolled down there. I was bidding on this house sight unseen. I had never seen the house.
And do you recommend that?
I do not recommend that. That's a no-go.
And you have checklists and rules in place now on how to bid on auction. Of course, some of those rules were set into place because there's tuition paid, right? Like you learned some lessons that now you have checklists implemented.
Right.
But for this particular one, obviously this breaks your rules now. Never bid on an auction property that you've never put eyes on. But at the time, you didn't have any rules.
Yeah, at the time, I was desperate. I needed a house, and I got a good deal on one, or what I thought was a good deal. So I go over there. I walk the property. And I'm like, I might as well just check, see if the door's unlocked. So I found an unlocked door, went into the house. I was able to do a full inspection myself, photos, attic, crawl space, everything. And I was like, this house is solid. Yes, I want it. The back deck was completely rotten out. And I was like, well, that's not a big deal. Whatever. The thing's going to get torn out in a few weeks. Signed the agreement and sent it off to my sister-in-law, who sent it to the auction house. And cool, the house is going to be ours. And the cool thing about this specific property is we could finance it. So they're able to finance the whole property with 5% down.
Like you can go get a conventional bank loan with this property, yeah.
Yep, exactly. I have a VA loan. I could not use my VA loan because the fees you had mentioned earlier, I had to pay fees to get into the auction. So I could finance it traditional. So we decided let's just finance this thing and we'll go from here.
When you were setting your max bid number, you said, okay, it was $1,000 over my max limit that I had set for myself initially. How did you come up with that max bid amount?
I knew the area. I knew what houses would appraise for once they were fixed up. And I knew cost per square foot. I had a good idea of what it would take to get this house fixed up to be able to be equal with the rest of the neighborhood and what houses were selling for.
And was your goal to get money back out of the house or break even?
I wasn't even trying to get money back out of the house at the time, but I wanted it to be able to finance at 20% or at 20% loan to value when I was complete, or because I had the VA loan, I was okay going above that if I was able to capture the value because I was living in the home. I'm able to pay a little bit more to fix it up.
You wanted at least to have 20% equity in the house initially. Mm-hmm. So you wanted an 80% LTV. So what you did is you figured out what you could pay. Your max number came from how much do you think that fixed up the property was worth, subtract the renovation cost, and leaving 20% in the deal. What is the max bid that you're willing to put into it? So then your plan was to come up with the cash, fix the property up out of pocket, and then probably go try and finance it, get a loan on it, and then pull that rehab cost back out of it.
Or at least leave it in, be able to finance it and get to that amount where I didn't lose money. I was selling a house that I had made good money on. I was planning on living in this house for a long time.
Right.
And so I put more money into this house than I would a regular flip because I made things, honestly, high end. I made it a really high end house for the neighborhood for what I wanted. So I was willing to leave a little bit money in the deal because it was my house I'm living in.
Yeah, and that house is a really, really nice house. It's in a super key location. It's really close to a college campus. It's close to your farm.
Yeah.
It was a great location. Yep. So you're getting emotionally invested in this property now. We've won the bid. You've put eyes on it. You're doing your rehab costs. You're planning what you're going to do construction-wise. Good news, you can get conventional financing on it. The bank's going to fund it. What happens with conventional financing is they send inspectors and appraisers out, and this is where you hit your first snag, right?
This would be the second snag because the first one we lost the house.
Yeah.
And now that we have it, my wife and I, we're emotionally invested in this house. So the appraiser comes out and said, we won't fund this house because, one, the back deck is rotten, and the back deck is a patio. It's 3 inches off the ground, and it's 2x4s that are completely rotten out. You can't even walk across it. You'll fall through. And there's an old fireplace that's in there that just needs to be gotten rid of. It's not a certified wood fireplace, and so it just needs to go. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to lose this house because some appraiser who has no vested interest in this is going to take it away. I was like, well, Linda says, what are we going to do? That's my wife. Like, what are we going to do? I'm going to go over there tomorrow with a couple guys. We'll get inside the house again, and we'll pull the stove, and I'm going to take my chainsaw, I'll cut out the back deck, I'll stack the lumber, and we'll call again.
And just for everybody listening right now, okay, this is a no-no, okay? Tyrel, he should not be going back to the house, right? We're 2 years past the date of the crime, so I think you're good here. Yeah. I don't know. I have to check the laws, but
statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, the statute of limitations. But essentially, you should not have been doing that. If anybody is going to do any amendments to the appraisal checklist, it needs to be the owner. But in this particular case, there was no owner because it was at auction. It was an auctioned property.
Right.
So if you wanted to get this property, you were either going to say, okay, I guess because of this rotten deck, I can't do what I want to do, or sua sponte, of your own accord, you were going to go make it happen. And you threw a bunch of dudes in the truck, drove down there, ripped out the stove, ripped out the back deck, and asked the appraiser to come back out.
I took my chainsaw, cut off the back deck. I stacked all the boards on the side of the house. I had to get back into the house that I had locked up and take the fireplace out and then call and said, hey, your appraisal is wrong. There is no fireplace and there is no deck. And he was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, no. I'm dead serious. Get out there, reappraise it because there's no deck. So he came out and he had a little bit of an attitude. He made me fix some stuff that was not on the report before and cost a couple $1,000s out of my pocket for like a crack in a piece of siding, some stuff like that I had to pay someone else to fix. Couldn't fix myself legally, but we got it. But it was a point where we're like, no, I'm not going to let something else stop me. Like, this is mine. and we're just going to go get it. These rules are arbitrary. Like, they're there to protect people, but in this case, they're not protecting anyone. They're only hurting the neighborhood. They're hurting me. So we're going to do something about it.
And this is a great example of being an entrepreneur, getting started in real estate. You're going to come across 100 reasons why you can't do something. People are going to tell you no. And oftentimes they want to tell you no because the system is heavy and clunky, and it's just easier to say no than to figure out a solution. When you're doing things in a box, you're going to have a lot of no's. And if you want to make any headway at all in this industry, you need to get creative and figure out where to go find the yes. And if people tell you no, you just keep asking new people or finding solutions until you finally get a yes to get it done.
That's the key, is finding solutions to get it done, because there's no clean deal. There's none. Everything requires some thinking, some hustle, and sometimes you may see the same solution. You may have seen it before. Oh, I know how to handle this now, but there's nothing that's just, nothing is handed to you.
I think a lot of people who are just getting started can feel overwhelmed or intimidated by all of these what ifs. What if this happens? What if this happens? And they said no. But by putting the reps in and facing those problems, you're actually forming yourself into being a more competent entrepreneur, a more competent investor. Each of those little problems that you find a solution for, it gets filed into your Rolodex. Whether it has a successful outcome or not, you're filing it into your toolbox. And these are tools that you can draw on in subsequent deals that have similar, problems. You say, hey, I have a solution for that. You become a much better problem solver, but you can't solve those problems if you just are constantly in fear, because you're never going to go through the trial of having a roadblock in front of you that you need to hurdle or go under or around. So that's a great lesson. I mean, we should aggressively attack things that we're afraid of or don't have an understanding of, because it's the only way to learn. People who are afraid to even take action because they don't know what they're doing is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. How are you ever going to learn if you don't freaking do it? You know?
You're 100% right. It's just about taking action and not accepting no for an answer. Like, run that thing until the end of the road. You're like, oh, there's nowhere else I can go. And sometimes you will lose, but you're going to win. You're also going to win.
So this is your first auction property. And that property turned into be a beautiful, great home. Great location. The value skyrocketed on it. And it really sparked the bug for auctions for you. So I want to use that lesson, because now that you have the bug, now you're like, oh, this is a tested model. Like, this can work. You started to aggressively move in the direction of auction properties and finding material on how to do it. Quickly tell us, like, what did the progression look like from that first property to where you are now and what you've been doing the last year?
I know you and I were both listening to Bigger Pockets a lot. Another shout out to Bigger Pockets, another podcast that inspired both of us. And we're sending back each other episodes. I'm someone who takes action on what he sees. I'm willing to just jump in and try. So one day, my dad fell out of his wheelchair and is laying on the floor. He couldn't get up. So he calls me and said, hey, I'm stuck. Can you come pick me up? He lives about a half hour from the house that we're talking about, just bought at auction. On my way, I'm listening to a podcast, and the guy talks about how he's flipping houses. He's flipping mobile homes. He says exactly how he finds them and what he's doing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start. I think I can do this. This was a half-hour drive there. And then on the way back, started implementing on my way home what this guy was talking about in the podcast. That night, I had a mobile home under contract to flip. And it cost me $7,000 out of pocket, renovated it for another 15, and made another 15 on top of that. So it was a lesson in, like, okay, this is actionable. And this leads me to while looking for that property, or while driving to that property when I was rehabbing it. This was during COVID. Everything's locked down. So the only thing I can do is, my kids are out of school, take them with me to the job site where my wife works. And so my daily habit was go to Home Depot, put on my podcast, grab the kids from home, and we head to this house to flip. And on the way, I hear this guy on Bigger Pockets talking about buying houses at auction. And it piqued my interest. I'm like, oh, I just did this. And it was like beginner's luck, but I just hit a home run with an auction. I'm a little confident, like, this is cool. Oh, not only is this cool, this is replicable, and someone is doing this.
At scale.
At scale. He had a great story that resonated with me, shared values. So his name's Aaron Amuchastegui, and I was like, oh, I want to learn from this guy. We just released a book called Bidding to Buy. Him and David Osborne put this book together. I listened to the podcast, like, I'm going to buy that book. So I buy the book, and I start implementing. And just slowly start traveling, looking for auctions.
you read the book and you're telling me all about the book. Can you make your wife read the book? And you read the book again and you're making spreadsheets that he tells you to make. And you're like taking action on what the book is telling you to do. You're like obsessed with this book. It's a period where the book is like everything. You're like reading it every freaking day. You're like, oh, he says to use this software. I'm using this software. He says to do this thing with your email. I'm doing this thing with the email. You were making the spreadsheets and the list. Aaron Amuchastegui didn't call you and say, do these things. You simply resonated with a message he had on a podcast. You ordered his book from the podcast, read the book, reread the book, and took action out of the book topics. That is really important for the segue into what's about to happen.
Right. I had been taking action. It was not like, okay, I'm kind of doing this. But at the same time, the opportunity that I saw on the horizon was with 2020 COVID lockdown. I thought, well, people are going to start losing their jobs. Like, the economy is built on a house of cards and it's about to come crashing down. I think it's going to be a repeat of what we saw before, and I wanted to be ready. That was like my motivator of saying, not only is this replicable, I can see this in the future. What actually happened is the government put a moratorium on foreclosures, and there was no auctions. So I had to go a different route and keep learning about real estate. In the meantime,
You started following Cody Sanchez.
Yeah, I started following Cody Sanchez.
You turned me on to Cody Sanchez.
Yep.
So we both are now obsessed with Cody Sanchez and her business acquisitions and
contrarian thinking.
Yeah. And so we're like consuming her material, and she ends up throwing this event.
Yeah. So she held a mastermind.
And we both flew down.
Yep.
So we took our wives too.
Yes.
We went down. We're like, no, we're not missing this. We're going to the conference. There's speakers there that we want to meet and see. And the reason for our motivation to do this is proximity. We just wanted to get in the room with these people that were doing these epic things.
Not only that, but we both got fired from our jobs 2 weeks before this.
Yeah.
And we were like, we're broke. We don't.
Yeah.
Is this worth our money? Like, do we have money to go down here? And it was nerve-wracking.
We had no income, zero income. So we got fired from being firefighters because we refused to get vaccinated. We were like, no, we want autonomy. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Essentially, we refused to do what they wanted us to do individually. We're like, nope, sorry, we dedicated our life to freedom and autonomy. So these are our values. We know them. We're not crossing them. So the fire department said, congratulations, you two are both fired. So here we are, freshly fired, no income. And these events are expensive, reasonably.
Yeah, they are.
And so we're like, man, should we go to this or should we not go to this? Instantaneously, like, yep, the value is going to be worth it. Let's go. We want to be in the same room with these rock star people that are doing big things.
Right. So Tim and I fly down there with our wives and go and listen to some great speakers. We took away a ton from this convention. And one of the reasons I wanted to get there is because, I read Aaron's book several times. I've been implementing it, and I just want to be, like I said, be around these people, learn from these people. I met Aaron he was waiting for his car, and we hit it off. He said, hey, let's do a Zoom call sometime.
You approached him and said, hey, Aaron, I read your book. It's been I'm implementing the information every day. It's changing my life. You thanked him. Hey, I wanted to say thank you for reading this.
Ironically, it wasn't for that book either. Everyone was there knew his business book, but his wife and him co-authored a book about homeschooling kids that I also implemented during COVID, and we started homeschooling my kids. And so I thanked him for his other book, which was even more influential than this one. And so he's like, oh, that's great. We should jump on a Zoom call sometime. A couple weeks later, he posts on his Instagram saying, hey, I'm looking for someone to come work for me. This is the position. And so I just replied, hey, I'm interested. Don't know if you remember me. We met at the door check at this hotel during the conference. Had a couple interviews back and forth.
He scheduled a Zoom call for you, but it happened to be that you took the Zoom call. It was like a random time. You're like somewhere on a friend's couch or something like that.
I just said yes, because what happened was I was actually door knocking. I started wholesaling. I told you that auctions had fallen off, and so I started learning to wholesale, and this was my first foray into that.
So you took the Zoom call while you were out and about door knocking.
Yeah.
Same guideline as auction, like precursor to auctions. And so on the interview, you're like, yeah, I'm actually doing what your book says to do right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And that was like the nail in the coffin that was like, oh, this guy takes action. He's doing the thing right now. Let's go. I want you to come out to Texas and work for me.
Yep. So at the time I'm living in Washington, he invites me out with my family to come check out Austin, and I did accept the job for him, worked remote for a little bit, and then moved out there to work there full time.
When you jumped into Austin, this is where things really picked up momentum because you started working from his office.
Mm-hmm.
And his office, it was like a fire hydrant of information because you're not buying a single property at auction. We're talking about auctions every month, hundreds of potential properties that might make it, might not make it. And we graduate into volume and scale. Okay. So now you're learning some hard and fast rules. You're learning what to do, what not to do. You're learning how to approach this as a business. Why don't we talk about some of those principles? Because you really start to learn what we call SOPs for buying properties at auction. It really is what builds the framework for you to do this on a repeatable basis. And you have a lot of good insight that people can walk away from this podcast right now and have action items that they can file away and start aggressively looking in this asset class. And before we talk about those action items and some benchmarks, why do you think auctions are still a good opportunity right now?
I think auctions are a great opportunity right now.
Why?
So we are seeing more auctions now than the past 3 years. That the leniency that the feds have put on the bank to say there's moratoriums, they're allowing people grace to not go into foreclosure right now. But if people don't continue to pay or catch up, those eventually are going to come into foreclosure. And we're seeing that now. We have more coming online that is a backlog. There is a normal amount in a healthy cycle of people who are like, they just aren't able to make their payments, right?
Yeah.
We stopped that for several years, and now we have a backlog. So we're going to have more foreclosures in the next couple of years since 2008.
And I want to interject on facts here. It's not that there's overwhelmingly more auctions than there's been at any other time. In fact, the data says auctions on average are down comparatively. But here's where the action item is. The famous philosopher Sun Tzu, The Art of War, he wrote the book Art of War. He's got this famous saying, I'm sure most people are familiar, strike while the iron is hot. The reason that there's so much opportunity at auction right now is not because there's a waterfall of foreclosures and defaulted debt. It's not 2008. It's because the backlog of normal auction properties that were halted during COVID through the moratorium are now starting to be auctioned off. There's not an excess, but there's an increased amount of volume that are coming to auction right now. And so right now the opportunity is ripe. And if you sleep on it, it may not be here a year from now or 2 years from now. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but the opportunity is right now, and we need to strike while that iron is hot.
Exactly. When I moved down to Austin, what I was doing is I was doing everything from finding the properties. We had an app and a program called PropHawk that I helped develop some of the outreach technology for. We could see all the properties that are going into foreclosure. It operates similar to auction.com or Hubzu that I mentioned earlier, but we owned it, and so I could have access to this data. And then I'll have teams go and drive the properties, something I didn't do on my first auction, and see, is this house still standing? Is it occupied or vacant? And get the inside scoop of how much do we think this rehab costs would be. And then I would analyze the data and say, how much do we think this would sell for? Then we say, like, okay, what do we think this would sell for minus our rehab costs, minus our holding costs and real estate agent, what we're going to pay our agents and fees. And that's our max bid number. So it was my job to figure out the max bid and to make sure that people were going around door knocking and then doing that myself, like going around and drive a county or two every month.
So what are some rules? Like, I think for the average person listening to this podcast, or maybe you're at a place of scalability, and in which case, if somebody's looking for advice on how to do that, feel free to reach out to Tyrel after the podcast. I'm going to leave some information in the show notes of how to get a hold of him. But let's talk to the general person who's just getting started, wants to take action, has a low barrier of entry, doesn't maybe have a ton of capital, maybe has one or two partners he can go to and say, hey, I can fund this deal if I find this deal off market or at auction. What are some action steps that are really useful and critical for somebody getting started that they can walk away with right now?
So you could do this whole thing. You could do all your due diligence for no money out of pocket. The counties have to list, it doesn't matter what state it is, the counties have to list what's going for auction, find out when they are, take your list, write it down, and then go drive to each one of those properties. Make sure it's still standing and knock on the door. Ask the person if they're in foreclosure. If they are, this is a great opportunity to potentially get a house off market before they go into foreclosure. But just see if someone's there, take pictures, take notes of the house and the neighborhood, and then go back, open up Zillow, which is the comping tool that I use. You don't even have to have MLS access. Just find out what houses are selling for in that neighborhood, and then come up with your max bid from there. You need to know a little bit of knowledge as far as what are your rehab costs going to go. That'll probably be honestly, that's the biggest learning portion of this is figure out what your rehab costs are. And there are plenty of calculators online that you can use and people that you can ask that will help you out on that.
Or partner with somebody who this is their expertise. You don't have to do all of the lifting. I think you and I really, in the beginning, were really hesitant to find partners. Mm-hmm. And I think our opinions have both changed on that to where now when we see a new deal or opportunity, it's no longer hesitation for partnership, but it's like, I don't want to do this unless I go find the right partner to do this with.
If you're at a picnic, do you want one grape, like the whole grape, or do you want a slice of watermelon? What do you get more of? Well, if you bring a bigger deal, if you bring in more partners, you can get better deals. It's not just you eating your one grape when you and I can have a slice of watermelon. Like which one's more? So bringing in partners, bringing in someone who is an expert or specializes in something else is going to get you to not only have more, but be part of something bigger and learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. Why are we driving these properties in the first place?
Well, driving the properties to make sure they're still there.
So we get the auction list, we get in the car and we're driving because maybe they were bulldozed, maybe there's a fire. Before you bid, this is one of your rules now that you don't break. Before you bid, you always get eyes on the property. Try to look in the window, knock on the door, talk to the neighbors. You want to gather as much data and intel because it helps you refine your bid amount. And the reason that you want to refine your bid amount is because at auction day, it gets emotional, right?
At auction day, it does get emotional. It's high intensity, especially if it's your first time, and it's a lot of money that you're dealing with. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have essentially in cash and cashier's checks at the auction, and you're bidding against other people. Having confidence, having eyes on is essential. Knowing that that property's there, also you're driving because you need to know the quality of the property. If you need to calculate your rehab costs, does it need a new roof? Does it need new windows? What kind of neighborhood is it in? Zillow can tell you a lot, but it can't tell you as much as getting eyes on, right?
What about Google Earth? Why can't we just use Google Earth for this type of a thing?
You can't use Google Earth because the data is not brand new, right?
Yeah,
it's
could be old.
Couple years old usually, and depending on, if you use Google Earth, it's a great real estate tool, but if you zoom in, every layer is a different year. So depending on where you're at, your data could be 3 years old, right?
Yeah.
I do actually use Google Earth and Google Street View every time that I comp a property to see what's around it, because if it backs up to a freeway, I'm going to knock $10,000 off the value. So it's not, right. It is a tool in the toolbox, but it does not replace eyes on.
Yeah, and eyes on, it just gives you more accurate estimates of repairs. Mm-hmm. Look in the window. Was there a fire? Is it full of dogs and cats? Are the windows missing? Is the foundation cracked? Does the roof have a hole in it? Get eyes on, but more importantly too, when you're driving these properties and getting eyes on, you could potentially talk to the owner or whoever's living there.
That's the coolest part. Buying houses, bidding at auction, that's exhilarating. That's fun. What's way better than that is helping people. The potential that you have to help someone who's in foreclosure, who is going to lose their house if you don't step in and help them, is great. And if you're not going to do it, then the likelihood that they go into foreclosure is 100%.
Yeah. It's either 100% into foreclosure or they're going to get preyed upon by predatory wholesale, look, it just takes a couple bad apples to give everybody a bad name. And if you have good intent and goodwill and you're out there trying to help these people, chances are you can save them from a bad actor. And not saying that everybody's a bad actor, but they are out there. They exist and they prey on people in tough situations just like this, So not only are we benefiting from making a deal, but we're helping them as well. It's a win-win.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to do this several times just by driving and knocking on the door and ask them, hey, I saw that your house was on the county website. It's scheduled to go into foreclosure next Tuesday and be auctioned off. Did you know that, or have you taken care of that? And either they'll say yes, they'll tell you, hey, screw you, get out of here. Or they'll say, yeah, I know, I haven't been able to take care of it. And there's your opportunity to be intentional and to help someone. One time we had a girl, single mom, whose father owned the house and he had passed away, and she had multiple siblings and no way of taking care of this house and is going into foreclosure. Just knocking on the door, being kind and offering to help her. She's like, yeah, I can't save it from foreclosure. I'm not able to do this. Can you help me? And we're able to give her the money to get it out of foreclosure, stop it from the bank, get legal involved so the entire family made money, and they were able to walk away with $100,000, and we were able to make, after rehabs, almost another $100,000 on top of that. Like, talk about a win-win. They're
Totally.
going from losing everything and making no money to making $100,000 in one afternoon of your time. Now, it takes more time on the back end, but it's one afternoon at a time to just initiate that conversation and be willing to help and be willing to do whatever it takes to stop the bank from putting it into foreclosure.
You're absolutely right. You're doing good. You're doing good here. Like, are you profiting? Yes, you are. You're making money. But also at the same time, and more importantly, you're making these people money, keeping them from having nothing, and you're helping them find a solution. You're helping them move. You're helping them figure out what is next. What's the next chapter? I love that principle. Really quickly, because we are running out of time, I want to jump ahead to auction day. I want to talk about how to be like fully prepared for auction day. So we show up, we've driven the properties, and ultimately, guys, what we were alluding to here, and I don't know if we didn't make this clear enough, we're trying to get these properties before they even go to auction. The ideal situation is that when we're talking to these people, we can find a solution before they go to auction, because that's where you can get the highest leverage, the most win on both sides of the transaction. But if people aren't agreeable, they're not open to help, ultimately, every time there's an auction, there are homes to be auctioned at that auction. So inevitably, houses will make it to the auction. And when you show up to auction day, after driving these properties and having your lists and having your pictures and talking to the owners and having a good idea, how can we be best prepared the day of?
So best prepared the day of is, one, have your list driven, know what your max bid is. This is my hard stop. Be prepared with cashier's checks, so checks made out from the bank or from your lender or your partner saying these are the amounts, right, in varying amounts. Couple $100,000 checks, 50s, 20s, 10s, 5s. So then you can give them increments when they ask for hey, this is how much the house is. Bring in some snacks and water because it's a long day. Bring in a pen and pencil to take notes, and bring things like Ziploc bags. A gallon Ziploc bag is a great tool in case here we're in the Pacific Northwest, it's raining. If you stand on the courthouse steps, you don't want all your notes to get ruined, but just show up early with those things and you're ready to bid.
Clarity wins here. I've heard you talk about multiple times. Once you start bidding, your emotion, your adrenaline starts getting high. Having detailed and clear information lined out, outlined, very easy to read is going to make you more successful, because you start to question yourself as the numbers and bids are escalating. You're asking yourself, crap, is this the correct property? Did I comp it correctly? Am I actually going to make money? You start to question yourself. So the more clarity you have on each of these properties, the more confident you can feel. And the more confident you feel, the less emotional you can be as the bids start to escalate. And you've actually had a couple of experiences where you've made some mistakes on bidding day due to heightened emotions.
Right. I made a mistake. There was multiple people bidding on this one property. There was 2 properties going to auction, and the addresses were one number off. And this is the legal property description, not the actual physical address. The physical address was close, and the legal description was so close that there were 3 people bidding on it and thought it was the other house, myself included. Well, I won, and embarrassingly had to say, just kidding. I didn't mean to buy this house. I actually didn't pay for it, so we didn't have to buy it. They re-auctioned it. But yes, having clarity, knowing your numbers, that goes back to what you were saying of the intel that we need is driving. The more intel you have, the higher your bid can be, because you know what you can afford.
Totally. Tyrel, I love this episode because it's got action steps and it's easy. Anybody can start doing it. You want to get into real estate? Go to the auction list at a county website, look at the properties that are up for auction, get the addresses, put them in Google Earth, map it out, make a driving list, take notes on the properties, do your bids. Get to auction day, find some money, get to auction day, and go make it happen. There's literally everything inside of this podcast episode to go take action and get your first project, potentially your first rental property in your soon-to-be empire. Thank you for coming in today. This information is so good, and I really hope people out there listening, take action. And if you don't know where to start, you're confused, you want some clarification on something in particular that was said in this episode, Tyrel, how do people get a hold of you?
You can hit me up on Instagram, the Tyrel Rose. That's probably the best place.
And to follow up on that, I host a local meetup called Tacoma Pints and Properties. I have a partner, Justin, and him and I hold these meetings once a month. They're the first Tuesday of a new month. And by the time you guys hear this episode, we will be past the last meeting, the meeting of May, but Tyrel was a keynote speaker. And I would encourage you, if you're listening to this and you want to get in the room with people that are doing deals, doing big things, you want to increase your knowledge and your network, come get in the room, shake hands, introduce yourself, gain access, gain phone numbers, because Tyrel gave a keynote at the last Pints and Properties where we went all into these deals. We got way more into detail. And just from that room that night, how many connections were made that now we're taking action on potential deals that we would have never had access to just because we were in the room and making those connections. So I would encourage you guys, please come out to Tacoma Pints and Properties. You can find all the information on that in the show notes. Of course, you can always see me advertising them on my social media at Gurule Tim. I would encourage you to go there, check it out, give me a follow. And as always, guys, if this information is helpful to you, if it is beneficial, if you believe it's changing your life and giving you action steps to get to the next level, to remove your limiting beliefs, please do me a favor. Invite people to listen to the podcast, share it, give us a review, give us some 5 stars, write a nice comment, because the more people that we can give this information to, the more people that have access, the better and the stronger we will all be. I am on a mission to commission all of you and make you financially well. I want to live in a nation of financially free and strong individuals, and I am devoted to bringing that to all of you, and I want everybody to come along on this journey with me. Tyrel, it has been a privilege, my man. Thank you for being in the studio today.
Thanks, buddy. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for the interview and just getting to hang out.
Heck yeah, man. And as always, Dynamis Nation, I will catch you all on the flip side.